potential, the mind, and the emotions, and the social skills too. And as a teacher, I think that we have the responsibility to develop that skill first in ourselves, and then to transmit and to I don't know, to facilitate how our student can obtain the same skill that we have.
Without any shadow of doubt.
Yeah, my question, do you think when we are talking food for thought, we can apply in our curriculum experiments, for example, science, to promote something to think first and to create another thought that can bring another thought? I think that critical thinking is that idea. As you say, the teacher have to be very motivated to our student feel motivated too. Do you think this is a question?
I think it's a must. I think without any shadow of doubt that it should be a must. It ought to be a must. Now the problem is other. The problem may be policies, educational restraints. Sometimes they, in a way, hinders that. Because as a society, I think we are not ready yet. I think we are ready, but society sometimes is way too focused on some other things rather than provided with critical thinking to the students. So the first revolution that you can start is in your classroom. Make your students think critically. That's the first step. If you don't do it, everything is useless. Everything is just like meaningless. Okay? But maybe if it's not in the curriculum or, for example, you can do it by yourself. You can do it. Even though sometimes, like on texts or books, do you think they are designed to develop that skill? I don't think so. It's just like fill the gap with the right form of the verb to be. Why to be and not be? It's like, because I have had, okay, never mind. It's like that could be from another discussion. But thank you for your question and welcome, Santiago. I hope Santiago is treating you well. Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Elizalde. And well, this is the end of the second part of the presentations here at the Second Congress of Second Languages and Foreign Languages, organized by Universidad Santo Tomás. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you would like to have my presentation, that's my email account. If you want to have it. Okay. I feel like Axel Rose.
In this third part of the presentations today, we have Professors Villalobos y Arellano representing Universidad Santo Tomás de Temuco and Universidad de la Frontera, talking about teaching, teacher talk and student talk. Who's in charge? A studio and classroom discourse and pedagogical interactions. Welcome.
Okay, can you listen to me?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Well, thanks for the presentation and the invitation. My name is Rodrigo, and she's my colleague, Constanza. And what we're going to be doing now is that we are showing you a research project in which we did some explorations about classroom discourse in a real classroom, right? Which was in the context of the final practicum of Constanza. Well, I think the name was already mentioned, right? But we want to emphasize that we are looking to see the differences between teacher talk and student talk in order of knowing who is speaking more in class, and as the title says here, who is in charge. Because we consider that teacher talk is sometimes a problem. Teachers speak too much. We love talking. And if we want our students to develop communicative skills and we want them to produce language, this is going to be an issue that we can research. So our area of concern here then is interactions, and specifically classroom interactions. So if we are assuming that the teacher shouldn't be the only one who is starting interactions, we should study this topic. And with that said, there are many studies about classroom interactions and classroom discourse in different subjects, not only in English. However, very few of them have been developed in EFL, and specifically in the context of using more functional approaches like the CLT or task-based or even an eclectic approach in which students can actually produce language and they're just not receivers of language. So our research questions are based on these interactional patterns. We want to know the patterns that we find in this case in a 5th grade in a private school in Temuco. Now, doing this research in a private school is different than working in the public sector, but having that idea can help us to develop that in the public sector for the future. So the general objective is to describe these interactional patterns. So we want to obtain a photograph of how these patterns are in this 5th grade. And specifically, first we wanted to quantify the interactions. We wanted to count them, right, as they were appearing in the class. We wanted to identify the use of classroom discourse by the teacher, in this case, one teacher of English. And we wanted to establish the coherence between what she thought she was doing and what she actually did in the class. So, to start talking about our constructs or tenets, the first one is communication. And these 3 authors agree that communication is the sharing of information, right? Ideas and attitudes between or among people. And it says sharing, and it says people. It doesn't say person. It's not just the teacher who is sharing information, but also the students. Another element is, of course, discourse. And here we are using the very traditional definition for discourse, the organization of language beyond the level of sentence, which possibly you learned at the university. However, this type of discourse is specific. it is the language that happens in the classroom, the language that is performed by the teacher, and the language that is performed by the students. That's what we call classroom discourse or pedagogical discourse. And interactions, defined as the triangular relation between the sender, the receiver, and the context. So again here, we are not going into just one direction, but into both directions, teacher and students. So we need to speak about teacher talk, right? This idea about the language used by the teacher. So we normally assume that the teacher is in charge of engaging, directing, explaining, and summarizing the language and content, among others. So we are the professionals, so students assume we are in charge of performing these activities. Normally, the teacher is the one who dominates the speech in the classroom. The big problem, because we want to foster communicative skills, but we are not giving them the chance to speak. However, the idea of the teacher dominating the classroom and the classroom talk is not leading necessarily to have a good teacher. Because the teacher can actually speak during the whole class, and maybe students are not going to learn much. Or the teacher can speak during the whole class, and maybe the students are not going to have the possibility to participate and to produce output. So Domaleska states that the most controlled the lesson and the language is, the less benefits we are going to have for our students. But normally, it is the teacher who is going to speak and control everything. So this is a very important factor for success or failure. If we consider that our purpose is that our students communicate and they are not just listeners or receivers of input. So teacher talk is crucial because it gives opportunities for students to be exposed, so it has this benefit. However, we are not forgetting that they are also there to produce. If we are talking about the units of analysis, we have these 4 moves that we analyze them in our methodology, right? Purpose, setting, form, and consequences. Purpose, the teacher directs the activities to reflect, justify, work in small groups, etc., etc. Setting, we understand here the roles of the language and the norms set in the classroom, especially for behavior. The way the teacher provides input, verbal or non-verbal interactions, and the consequences, the change of the level of the task, change in the interactions, expectations about students' knowledge or performance. Particularly, this is very important in the culture in which the class is happening. Possibly in Asia, the interactions are going to be expected to happen differently than in our context. And we are also analyzing the types of questions, right? So we have these 3 categories. Procedural, used for classroom routines and classroom management. Convergent, they are used to focus students on the same topic and to generate the same answer in them as they normally elicit short answers. The previous presenter was talking about this. Give me the definition of this. Is this true or false? What's the true alternative? Maybe that is not going to be real language used by the teacher. And the divergent questions, which are our interest, they are used to encourage different answers and students' opinions so that they require a real use of the target language. And there they are going to discuss, and there they are going to actually participate in the class. And this is a private school, so they had the level for doing that. The methodology was mixed with the idea of explaining a very particular reality, one course in a private school, non-experimental because we just wanted to get the picture of it, and it has characteristics of a case study. It was one teacher and one group. The sample was by convenience because the school and the course were accessed in the context of a final practicum. And the participants of the study are a teacher of English and the students of 5th grade. The data collection techniques, 4 entries of field notes, and a survey by Petkova 2009 that was administered to the teacher.
Okay, hello. I hope everyone can hear me. If not, I'm sorry. Okay, so now we're going to continue with the results and the discussion, first of all, of the field notes. First of all, the first chart is based on Krasel, Edwards, and Springer framework of teacher discourse moves. The main category here is form with a 73%. Well, the high number of tokens in this category may be due to, as stated by Blanche 2009, teachers are in charge of mostly everything on the class, explaining, summarizing, leading. Nevertheless, we know that that doesn't mean that the students do not have to participate on the class. Then we have purpose in blue with a 17%. These tokens come from discipline issues because the students were talking or they were not paying attention on the class. About this, the Almeida 2007 explains that sometimes the teachers and the students do not share the same perspective on what's an acceptable behavior on the class. So the teacher needs to be constantly reminding the students, you have to raise your hand, or you don't have to talk, you have to sit, and so on. Then we have setting with a 6%, and here again we have discipline issues. And mainly the students did not take turns to speak. So they just said the answers aloud, shouting them, not raising their hands. So the teacher had to remind them, please raise your hand, please don't talk without permission. And last but not the least, we have consequences with a 4%. Here the teacher lowered the level of the task or the expectation of on the students. You might ask why or how. Because when she asked something in English, she immediately said, okay, you can all answer in Spanish. No waiting for the students to think or to try to give an answer in English. Then we have the type of questions by Richard Lockhart. We have procedural, convergent, and divergent. In the procedural questions, it's just with a 12%, and it is so 2015 explained that for trying to avoid classroom management issues, the students should be highly active on the lessons. Yet that was not observed in these classes. Next, we have convergent questions in red, with a 72%. Richard and Lockhart explained that these questions do not lead to real communication. The teachers usually use them to generate yes or no answers or just to check the information reviewed during the class. And last, we have divergent questions with just a 16%. These divergent questions, Lockhart mentions that they are used to generate longer answers on the students or more complex answers. Now, if we compare convergent and divergent questions, it is obvious that convergent questions are the ones that monopolize the lesson. Next, we have the classroom interactions initiated by the teacher or by the students. In red, we have the students' interactions with a 36% versus a 64% from the teacher. So here we can clearly see whose speech dominates the lesson. Then, this is like the second part of the results of the survey. The survey was divided into 3 main categories: vocal strategies, questioning strategies, and enhancement of teacher talk strategies. In this table, here we have the type of answers the teacher could give, which were yes, no, sorry, or needs improvement. So, in this part of the survey, the teacher mentioned that she did not involve students on language discussions or in problem-solving situations. About this, sorry, I'm nervous. Okay, about this, it is obvious that if the teacher does not involve the students into this type of activities, the language they use is not going to be one to communicate effectively. Then we have questioning strategies. Well, here the teacher mentioned her need to improve the questioning techniques. She mentioned that she uses convergent questions mostly on the classes, and that she did not ask questions which require a lengthy response from the student. Here, Barony explains that convergent questions are generally used because the teacher wants the students to participate on the lessons. Nevertheless, overusing this type of question leads a negative situation in which the students are not able to give longer answers or to answer to more complex questions. And this was observed during the classes. The students were not able to answer to more complex questions when the teacher asked them. And finally, we have enhancement to teacher talk strategies. One of the points we wanted to highlight here is a negative answer the teacher gave on the statement, providing students with opportunities to share experiences, opinions, or personal knowledge related to the lesson. The teacher admitted she did not allow the students to talk more freely during the classes. Here, Harmer 2001 explains that the most important job of the teacher is to let the students participate on the classes and to let them use the language communicatively. Yet that was sadly not observed during these classes. Finally, for the conclusions of this research, first of all, the interactions were obviously dominated by the teacher during the most of the time we were observing them. The use of the classroom discourse of the teacher was centered in form, which is the actual teacher talk. Then, convergent questions, as we saw on the chart, monopolized the lessons as they were the most used ones. Based on this information, we can say that there was not a communicative aim on the lesson, and this was supported by the evidence the teacher provided us on the survey, where she mentioned many times that she did not provide the students with freely talk or problem-solving situations. Nevertheless, there was consistency on the teacher's answers and on what we observed during the lessons. She was conscious that she had problems on her classes and that she needed to fix them, so she was willing to improve those situations. Then the limitations of this study. First of all, limited time to carry out the research. We had approximately just 3 months to do it on the first semester of the present year. The few participants in the survey. We just applied the survey to one teacher because that was the teacher that was willing to participate and that was available for us. And we did not want to generalize on this. So we just wanted to present what was happening there. And only 4 observations, which were the field notes, because we did not have more time to collect more. And finally, the future contributions, that is that this research could be replicated, but with more participants on diverse schools, so we can generate more representative data so as to know what is happening in our classrooms. These are our references. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now it's moment for questions coming from the public.
Hello. You said that there were field notes to collect the information, to gather the information.
Yes.
Did you notice any sort of interaction between students without the teacher?
Yes, but they were in Spanish and sometimes mostly not related to the class. And when they were happening, the teacher taught them. Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, related to the question that was just asked, what was your perception, because you observed the class, what was your perception of the students' motivation and their self-efficacy towards English? I mean, you say that this is a private school, that they had the level. Would they have had the level to conduct, to have a little discussion, for example?
Some of them were able to do that because during the observations or out of the class, they talked to me, just in general. So they could use the language, but they feel that the teacher was not funny enough because she was just controlling the class. So you have to do this now, and you have to complete this worksheet, and we have this BBT, and they just reviewed the information they had to, but they didn't have the opportunities to actually participate or to use and to be involved on the lessons.
Any more questions?
Do you think the results would be significantly different if the study was replicated in a public school?
Sorry.
Do you think the results you got from this experience would be significantly different if the study was replicated in a public school, or the results would be similar?
I personally think that they will be similar. Because we know that in public school the level tend to be a little lower sometimes, not all the times. But I think that it comes from the way the teacher teaches. If I am willing to let my students participate, even if they don't speak English, I can let them show me with the body, okay, why, stand up, show me the answer. Okay, so I think that it comes from what the teacher does. If the teacher is willing in the public school to let them students participate, even if they don't talk, it's okay. If they are not, that's a shame, because we know that our students are the ones that are being damaged by this, because it's damaged. They are not learning.